Good morning and greetings from Marrakesh, where the Atlantic Council is hosting this live interview during the IMF World Bank Annual Meetings Week here in Morocco. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Her Excellency Nadia Fettah Alaoui, the Minister of Economy and Finance of the Kingdom of Morocco. We're also very delighted to welcome Ms. Ebru Pakcan, the Middle East and Africa Cluster and Banking Head at Citi. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you for the invitation.
And please accept our heartfelt expression of solidarity and support for Morocco in light of the devastating climate-induced events that have recently impacted the country. Welcome, Ms. Pakcan. We are thrilled to have you represent the business perspective in this discussion and look forward to hearing your insights on the Middle East market. So let me begin by asking Her Excellency to provide just an overview of the new reform program recently launched by the Moroccan government, and please also highlight the economic outlook in Morocco for 2023-2024.
Well, first, thank you for having me and for being in Marrakesh despite this tough, I would say, human tragedy. So Morocco has a very strong agenda of reforms under the guidance of His Majesty. Maybe I can highlight 3 or 4, I would say, main reform. The first one is definitely fundamental for a strong social state. It was, I would say, in the DNA of our country, in the vision of His Majesty, but after COVID-19 it was clear we need better education, we need healthcare, and we need social protection for all Moroccans. And we are in the pace of implementing this strategy, and we will be done within 2 or 3 years. To, I would say, also fund for all this because it's costly. We are creating, I would say, the proper ecosystem for easing business and for pushing high for a dynamic of investment, local, international investments, by diversifying the economy and allowing actually for all the enablers. So pushing strategic, I would say, industry, agriculture roadmap, but also enabling for good education in universities, digital approach, and clean energy. And to do all this, we need to be very, I would say, disciplined in getting back to strong fundamentals in macroeconomics. So this is what keeps us busy. Of course, it's not just a peaceful journey to the reforms. So we have also to deal with the multiple crises that we have been going through. And we also doing our best to mitigate the impact for the sake of safety and the well-being of population, but also not to compromise this strong reform agenda.
Thank you very much. And Ebru, the economic slowdown in MENA, with GDP dropping from around 7% to 1% in the oil exporting economies and from 4.3% to around 2.4% in the oil importing economies, how does this impact Citi's business in the region, both positively and negatively? And in which sectors does Citi see more potential for economic growth?
Sure, thank you. But let me also take the opportunity, to share our deepest sympathies with the devastating earthquake in Marrakesh, and it's really good to be here and be able to stand by the people. I think in terms of the business environment in Middle East and North Africa, we still need to probably put it into 2 different buckets. Yes, the growth objectives have been sort of turned down a little bit. But if you look at the oil exporting GCC markets and the type of foundation or the liquidity base that they are building on from, there is still a lot of potential of growth and investments, whether that's around the reforms, whether that's the decarbonization and reducing the dependency on oil and gas-related revenues. There is a very big diversification agenda in terms of different investments into financial services, digitization, infrastructure build out. We are seeing a lot of demand from investors. Obviously, that journey will have to continue, and a balance of investments will need to be made to be able to be positioned for the next decade. But we do see a lot of potential there. Coming back to North Africa, I mean, we are here in Marrakesh and we are actually very excited with the base from which, again, Marrakesh is continuing with the reform agenda. Your Excellency, you just touched upon that. And there is actually some very, very important global trends that we should think about. One of them is how natural gas resources are becoming very important. And the project, for example, that's going on between Nigeria and Morocco in terms of becoming a source provider, not only for energy sustainability here in the country, but for Europe. I think that's a very good example of how the geopolitical and the economic position of Morocco can be sustained. But also, secondly, we know that there's a nearshoring that's happening, mostly coming out of Asia. North Africa broadly is very well positioned for that. There are many examples of multinational companies making those FDI investments to this part of the world, and I would call out Morocco as a great example of benefiting from that. What has been achieved in the automotive industry, again, over the last decade is a very good example of that, and there is more. And lastly, the opportunities around renewable energy, whether that's solar, whether that's wind, and how again Morocco can benefit from that is going to be, I think, a very, very exciting journey. We just have to sustain through these difficult times globally in the economy.
Thank you, Ebru. And on that point on green energy, Your Excellency, Morocco has significant potential in solar, wind, and hydropower energy. Currently, 40% of the country's electricity capacity is generated from renewables, and by 2030, it's expected that renewables will make up 50% of the energy mix. Can you highlight the government's plan to promote investments, financing, research and innovation in the green energy sector?
Allow me first, maybe I didn't answer the forecasts for the growth. So we're forecasting 3.4% for 2023 and 3.7% for 2024, thanks to all the effort that we've been talking to. Of course, green energy is in the heart of our strategy and our ambition of having a stronger and cleaner economy. We have made a very clear choice to go to private sector, to private-public partnerships. And each time that we are launching a tender or inviting investor, either locally or internationally, to invest in wind, solar, and hopefully soon in green hydrogen, we have a lot of appetite. Appetite because the environment of investment is really friendly and safe. We have political and economic stability. It is important. We have a clear strategy. We have a regulation that is improving. It has improved. It still needs to improve, and we are committed to this. And then the markets are there. Internal market. We still need green electricity for our own use. We need green electricity and energy for industry that are exporting to Europe, and hopefully we will have enough energy and clean energy to export outside. So the investors coming to Morocco are also coming with financial solutions. I think that we are getting access to the capital markets all over the world, actually. And we also hope that we can mobilize internal outside financing through green bonds. We already tried some of them locally, and hopefully we will be ready also for some others to go to the international markets.
Other regional players you think you would be keen to collaborate with in terms of green energy economic partners?
Morocco is an open market. We are open to cooperation and partnership. It's our DNA in all areas, so definitely in green energy we are more than welcoming. And you were touching on this pipeline on gas between Nigeria and Morocco, covering more than 14 countries. So in terms of openness, we can assure you that this is our mindset, this is our ambition and the vision of His Majesty.
Thank you. And Ebru, despite the high return on investment in the Middle East and North Africa, averaging around 20%, the region's economies encounter notable challenges, including limited foreign currency reserves, high interest rate volatility, and rising debts. How does Citi view the financial risk in the MENA region, and what hedging strategies does the bank employ when investing in the region?
Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right, and of course, the last few years of interest rate environment, going up higher as the rest of the world also deals with the inflation challenge, which quite honestly for many emerging markets is not necessarily a new phenomenon. But on the back of what has happened with the Ukraine-Russia war, and then of course the increase of the dollar interest rates, etc., it has really exacerbated the amount of challenge in terms of debt raising for many governments. On top of that, in some of the markets which hasn't necessarily progressed that foreign exchange or currency management regulation, we are seeing the strains, and a good example of that would be Egypt, where the fact that for many foreign investors, they are not necessarily able to access US dollar or other hard currencies is a very, very significant challenge. That doesn't mean that they are giving up on future growth opportunities, because we have to also know the importance of some of these markets in terms of what they can offer in the future. So then what you're seeing is people trying to think about how to manage risk. And that's where, whether that's the commodities, and of course oil being one of the most significant ones with the recent increase and sustained oil high prices, but also interest rates as well as currency hedging. These are important tools. And it is very important to be able to actually tailor these solutions for corporates as well as for governments for their own unique situation. That's where we do work, because we are present actually in this region, and in the broader Middle East and Africa region, we have a presence through licensed entities in 29 markets. We are working with each one of those governments, and of course with our multinational corporates in terms of helping them with those risk solutions. Your Excellency touched upon the importance of private-public partnerships as well, because there's a lot more creative solutions that can be actually devised, including some international investors who could be actually part of these solutions in different ways. It's important, as I said, for us to be able to actually ride the storm of the last few years and try to actually continue to focus on what really matters in the future. And that's going to be things like climate change, that's going to be things like digitization trends, etc. So that's where we are.
Thank you. And as we're speaking about debt, Your Excellency, in the case of Morocco, the government debt accounts for about 70% of GDP. Public foreign currency debts represent almost 50% of GDP. Do these figures raise any concern for you? What is the public management strategy for debt in Morocco?
This level of 71% of debt is really due to is the consequence of COVID. We were much below this number. So coming from this COVID period, I think it was wise decision taken all over the world really to stand in front of this crisis. So what's the plan? The plan is to keep this average of 70% for coming 3 years, not to compromise the growth trajectory. This is very important, because the solution actually for macroeconomic fundamentals is to have a strong and sustainable growth. So the plan is to remain at 70% for 3 years, to allow to grow to 4, then a bit more than 4% growth, and starting from there, decrease progressively the debt to GDP. What allows for this is that first we rely mainly on the local market. This is very important. The target is between 7 to 75%, and we are even more relying on the Moroccan market. And when we go to the international market, I think we are getting very, I would say, honest condition, despite the tightening of the financial condition over the world. So we are taking carefully this issue of debt, but we are actually not reacting. We are planning. We have a clear strategy and proactive strategy.
Thank you. And Ebru just mentioned climate change, which is becoming a concern globally, as we've witnessed recently in the region with the flooding in Libya, the earthquake here in Morocco. So many investors are increasingly interested in ESG, environment, social, and governance matters, and yet ESG assessment and disclosure mechanisms are nearly absent in the region. How does Citi reconcile investor demands for ESG standardization given the constraints of the financial market infrastructure in MENA?
Look, I think one of the things that we should probably put on the table is the energy transition, energy security, and economic growth for the markets. They are not all different topics. They are actually one of the same. It's very important for us to be able to set those plans for the longer term energy transition and work towards that vision. But in the meanwhile, we are very cognizant of the fact that for many of our clients, and of course for the countries that we are operating in, there is a need for energy security and to be able to actually sustain the required energy. And if you can get there with renewables soon, that's great. But for a while, there is going to be that need for hydrocarbons to continue. So we are trying to take that very balanced approach, and we are very focused on, is there a plan? Is there a credible plan for the transition? And is that being executed? So it is, I think, a lot of dialogue and communication and demonstration and credibility of execution plans that will help us and all financial services institutions to be able to actually continue financing what may be needed in the short term, but then also trying to put more of our energy into those transition or renewables or decarbonization type of efforts. I think the point that you're making about, is there enough disclosure, is there enough transparency, that's changing quite quickly. Many of the regulators in the region, many of the governments are actually starting to take those steps towards having more rules around disclosure requirements. There is dialogue going on with the industry. I think we're going to see that fast changing. And for especially North Africa, which has, as I mentioned before, a great opportunity to be the source, if you like, for some of those changes with Europe. And as a nearshoring hub, given that Europe has been very focused and very targeted in terms of how it's viewing ESG, I think this is probably one of the things that needs to really accelerate in North Africa by different governments in terms of how they get that regulation, transparency, and execution paths much more clear for the public. That will help investors, that will help the financiers, and I think that's going to help the governments greatly.
Thank you, Ebru. Maybe a quick intervention on the plan to act upon climate change in Morocco. We wrap up with this point.
It is high in the agenda, and it's part of all the strategies, and I cannot agree more that we need, I would say, funding and strategies to implement it, but adaptation is also key, and strong reforms.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency Nadia Alaoui and distinguished CEO Ms. Ebru Pakcan, thank you very much for insightful answers and comments. I'm sure the audience enjoyed this interview as much as I did. We hope to see you again very soon. Thanks also to our audience who watched this interview today, and goodbye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.